Retirees with $2.5 million are finding out that a meaningful chunk of their savings was never entirely theirs. And the financial advisors who helped them build it were giving textbook correct advice the entire time. That's the part nobody says out loud. The advice wasn't wrong. The outcome is still a gut punch. And the 5 regrets I'm about to walk you through have almost nothing to do with picking bad stocks, timing the market poorly, or any of the things you'd expect. They're about a tax structure that was quietly building for 30 years inside accounts that looked perfectly healthy. Strategic windows that opened and closed without anyone pointing at them, and a meter running in the background while everyone was watching a different scoreboard. Here's the frame I want you to carry through this whole video. Your 401k, your traditional IRA. Think about those accounts as a property you've been building and improving for 3 decades. You own it. You've maintained it. You feel good about what you built. But there is a lien on every dollar inside it. The IRS has been a silent co-owner from the day you made your first contribution. They don't send invoices. They don't ask for rent. They wait. And when you start withdrawing at 65 or 73 or 75, your silent partner shows up with their hand out. The size of their cut wasn't fixed from the beginning. It was determined incrementally by decisions you made or didn't make, sometimes 20 years ago. You think the problem is that your investment return wasn't good enough. The actual problem for a lot of people with real money saved is that they've been watching the wrong scoreboard their entire career. Your account balance is one scoreboard. Your after-tax, after Medicare, after required minimum distribution retirement income is a completely different scoreboard. And the IRS has been watching the second one the whole time. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you the surviving spouse calculation that is genuinely the most devastating thing in this list, and also the most entirely preventable. But first, I want to lay down the psychological foundation. Because once you understand the mental model behind all of this, everything else clicks into place. Behavioral economists have a term for what I'm about to describe. Call it the accumulation hangover. After 30 or 40 years of building wealth, watching the number climb, deferring gratification, treating the portfolio like something almost untouchable, your brain locks in. The behaviors that made you rich start running on autopilot. And autopilot doesn't know the game has changed the moment you stop accumulating and start spending. There's a retired couple I read about in research from the Employee Benefit Research Institute. Let me call them the Hendersons. 2.4 million in the portfolio. Both 63. Both healthy enough to hike Patagonia, which was literally on their list, written down somewhere between the travel magazine clippings. They had the money. They had the time. They had the health window, which, if you've watched someone's knees go in their mid-70s or seen what a routine health scare does to travel plans, you understand is genuinely finite and non-negotiable. They didn't go. Their advisor, competent, well-intentioned, not doing a single thing wrong, kept reminding them about sequence of returns risk, market volatility. The danger of drawing down principal in the early retirement years. The Hendersons, who had spent 4 decades treating the portfolio like something sacred, heard that warning and did what they'd always done. They protected the number. They lived on Social Security and pulled roughly $85,000 per year from the portfolio when their own retirement model showed a high probability of success at $150,000 per year. Fast forward 11 years, his knees are shot. Her health has had complications. Patagonia isn't realistic. The Alaska cruise they kept postponing, uncertain now. Their portfolio sits at $2.6 million, more than when they started actually. And both of them will tell you, without hesitation, that not spending the money when they were physically capable of enjoying it is one of the biggest regrets of their retirement. Research from IRMAA found that 42% of retirees with $2 million or more spend less than $100,000 per year in retirement. 42%. Nearly half of people with $2 million plus are living like they retired on $800,000. The money is there. The permission never arrived. The fix is something called the guardrails approach. You set a spending floor and a ceiling tied to portfolio performance. Strong year, you authorize yourself to spend more. Down year, you pull back slightly. You model the actual dream trips in your retirement plan with specific dollar amounts, specific years attached, and you run the numbers. Most people who do this exercise are genuinely surprised at how little a $40,000 trip registers on a $2.5 million portfolio. The math doesn't care about the emotional weight you've attached to the withdrawal. Your brain does. Your brain is the problem. This is important context for everything that follows. Because the accumulation hangover isn't just about spending. It's about the muscle memory of deferring spending, deferring taxes, deferring decisions. And in retirement, continued deferral of the wrong things is exactly how a well-built portfolio becomes an unexpectedly expensive one. Now let me get into real money, and I mean real money lost. Here's a setup before I show you the numbers. Within your retirement savings, there are 3 fundamentally different buckets of money, and understanding which ones you have and in what proportion determines almost everything about your tax exposure in retirement. Bucket 1 is pre-tax, your traditional IRA, your traditional 401k. The silent co-ownership I described lives here. Every dollar that comes out is ordinary income, taxed at your full marginal rate. Bucket 2 is after tax, your brokerage account, taxed at ordinary income or capital gains rates, depending on what you do with it, but you've already paid tax on the principal. Bucket 3 is tax-free, your Roth IRA, your Roth 401k, already taxed, never taxed again, no required minimum distributions. Ever. Most corporate career savers end up with almost everything in bucket 1. That was the default for decades. Maximize the 401k, get the employer match, defer, defer, defer. The advice was right for accumulation. But a retirement with everything concentrated in bucket 1 means zero flexibility in how you generate income. You need money? You pull from pre-tax. Every dollar is ordinary income. You can't choose a low-income year to draw from tax-free funds. You can't manage your total income to stay below important thresholds. You're a guest in a house you thought you owned outright. And the threshold I want to talk about right now, the one that most people have never heard of until it's too late to do much about it, is called IRMAA. IRMAA stands for Income-Related Monthly Adjustment Amount. It's a surcharge on your Medicare Part B and Part D premiums that kicks in when your income crosses certain thresholds. Most people learn about it for the first time when the bill arrives. Here's how fast it's moved. In 2007, the third IRMAA surcharge bracket added $126 per month to your Medicare Part B premium. In 2026, that same bracket adds $527 per month. And according to Medicare's own trustees, that figure is projected to reach $782 per month by 2032 and $902 per month by 2034 per person, on top of your regular base premium for crossing an income line. For a married couple, that's potentially $20,000 per year in additional Medicare costs that evaporate before anything else in the budget gets touched. Not for better coverage, not for access to better doctors, for crossing a threshold that, with planning in your 50s and early 60s, was entirely manageable. Now let's talk about the required minimum distribution problem, because this is where the silent co-ownership becomes impossible to ignore. At age 75 under current law, the IRS requires you to start taking money out of your pre-tax account whether you need it or not. The calculation is your account balance divided by a life expectancy factor from IRS tables. For a 75-year-old with a $5 million IRA, the required minimum distribution is roughly $203,000 every year, mandatory. All of it taxed as ordinary income. You cannot tell the IRS you don't need the money this year. The meter runs, and that $203,000 doesn't exist in a vacuum. It pushes your provisional income, the formula used to determine how much of your Social Security benefits are taxable, well above the threshold, where up to 85% of your Social Security check becomes taxable income. It puts you in the top IRMAA brackets. It may push you into a higher federal bracket entirely. Each of those effects costs real money. None of them are visible on the account balance scoreboard. I want you to understand something. I mentioned earlier that I'd introduce a character named Carol. I'm going to come back to her in a minute, and what happened to her retirement after her husband died is the number that makes everything I've been building to snap into focus. But first, one quick thing about the advisors who should have been preventing all of this. The Medicare surcharges, not a major concern. Don't stress about those. That sentence was spoken in a lot of advisor meetings in 2015. In 2026, not a major concern, costs a couple over $10,000 per year in additional premiums. Don't stress, Gerald. Okay, $10,000 a year, every year in retirement says hi. Now, Carol. Carol and her husband Frank had $5 million in a traditional IRA between them. A lifetime of disciplined saving. Maxed the 401k every year for 3 decades. Didn't panic during downturns. Did everything right. By the time they both hit their mid-70s, they were taking required minimum distributions of roughly $203,000 per year. As a married couple filing jointly, they were managing. The IRMAA surcharges were real, but they navigated it together. Frank died at 78. The IRA didn't change. The required minimum distributions stayed approximately the same, still north of $200,000 per year. What changed is that Carol now files as a single taxpayer. Single filer tax brackets are roughly half the width of joint filer brackets. The income that sat in the 22% bracket when they filed jointly is now pushing Carol into the 24% bracket as a single filer. She immediately lost half of her standard deduction. Her provisional income calculation went up, which means a larger portion of her Social Security is now taxable, and IRMAA recalculates. With $200,000 in required minimum distributions and $40,000 in Social Security as a single filer, Carol is in one of the top IRMAA tiers. She pays an extra $446.30 per month for Medicare Part B, an extra $83.30 per month for Part D surcharges, on top of the base premium. Added together, more than $6,300 per year in additional Medicare costs per year, not for better coverage, not for a preferred network, for crossing an income line while grieving. Here's what I want you to sit with. Carol isn't in financial distress. She has $5 million. The pain is that this was entirely preventable. If she and Frank had done strategic Roth conversions during any of the years when both of them were alive and healthy, moving even a modest annual amount from the traditional IRA into Roth Carol's required minimum, distributions would be lower right now. Her provisional income would be lower. Her IRMAA bracket might be 0. The surviving spouse tax penalty largely eliminated, with planning that would have cost far less in total taxes than what she's now paying every single year as a fixed permanent overhead. Nobody pointed at the window. By the way, and I'm placing this here because this is exactly the kind of thing I spend time on that most financial content ignores. Hit subscribe if you like the content. Otherwise, YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. The surviving spouse penalty almost always falls on the wife. Women live 5 to 6 years longer than men on average. If you are a married couple and the majority of your retirement savings is in traditional pre-tax accounts, the person most exposed to Carol's situation is statistically sitting in the room with you right now. That is not a footnote. That is a planning priority. And the financial industry didn't set a trap here. Nobody designed this to hurt Carol. The incentive structure just produces advisors who are compensated to grow portfolios, not to model what happens to the survivor when one of you is gone. Asset management fees are a percentage of portfolio value. There's no recurring fee attached to running the IRMAA scenarios. There's no billing structure around Roth conversion windows. The incentive structure of the industry is oriented toward a different output than what Carol needed, not a conspiracy. Amused disappointment is the right response. The system is working exactly as designed, and Carol got caught in it. Now, let me come back to a conversation about Social Security timing that surprises almost everyone, because the conventional wisdom here is so deeply ingrained, it's essentially law. And for certain retirees with large pre-tax balances, it might be wrong. The advice you've heard your whole life: delay Social Security as long as possible. Every year you wait past 62 increases your benefit by roughly 8. Wait until 70 and you've locked in the maximum lifetime payout. This is mathematically sound for most Americans. For someone with $2 to $3 million sitting in a traditional pre-tax account, it might be exactly backwards. Think about what delaying Social Security from 62 to 70 actually requires. You need 8 years of living expenses from somewhere. If the bulk of your savings is in a 401k or traditional IRA, somewhere is a pre-tax account, and every dollar you pull out is taxed as ordinary income. You are paying taxes to fund your own living expenses while you wait for a benefit to maximize. Let's put numbers on this. A couple with $3 million in a traditional IRA delays Social Security to 70. From 62 to 70, they pull $150,000 per year gross from the IRA. That's $1.2 million in total withdrawals, all taxed as ordinary income. Plus, they've lost the compounding growth on that $1.2 million over 8 years. At 7% annualized, that compounding loss is not a rounding error. It's a real number with multiple commas in it. Now, run the alternative. Same couple claims Social Security at 62. Combined benefit is $50,000 per year. Now, they only need $100,000 from the IRA annually. The IRA stays larger, longer, it compounds more aggressively. When required minimum distributions begin at 75, the account is meaningfully bigger because it was drawn down more slowly during the early years. A Vanguard research team found that for certain retirees, particularly those with substantial pre-tax balances, claiming Social Security earlier and drawing down the IRA more slowly can preserve more total wealth over a full retirement. Not always, not for every scenario. But the point is that Social Security timing, IRA withdrawal rate, taxable income, IRMAA brackets, and the provisional income formula for how much of your Social Security is taxed, these all interact with each other. You cannot optimize one variable in isolation and expect to optimize the system. Most people make the Social Security decision like they're making one move. They're actually making 5 moves simultaneously, and they don't know it. Which brings me to the final regret, the one that connects everything, including Carol, including the Henderson couple, including every decision I've described today. And it's the one that, honestly, I find most infuriating in the specific way where the infuriation is more like amused disappointment. There are 2 fundamentally different kinds of financial professionals in this industry, and the industry does almost nothing to help you understand which one you're sitting across from. Type 1, the portfolio manager. Asset allocation, diversification, rebalancing between equities and bonds as you age, adjusting risk tolerance, annual review with a pie chart. This is legitimate work. It's solving one specific, well-defined problem. The problem is just narrower than most people, with $2 to $3 million actually needs solved in the decade before retirement. Type 2, the comprehensive planner. This person is thinking about your marginal tax rate at age 75. They're asking whether you use the 2020 sell-off to do Roth conversions at a 34% discount. They're modeling your provisional income to keep it below the IRMAA thresholds. They're running the surviving spouse scenario while both of you are healthy and the window is still open. This is a different job, different skills, different outputs. The regret from retirees who had a portfolio manager for 15 or 20 years usually isn't directed at the advisor personally. It's the specific frustration of discovering too late that you needed a different conversation and that nobody told you to ask for one. The advisor was solving the stated problem. The unstated problem, the tax consequences of a large pre-tax portfolio over a 30-year retirement, went unexamined. And this isn't mysterious when you look at incentives. Asset management fees are a percentage of portfolio value, recurring, predictable, scalable. There's no clean fee structure around modeling Roth conversion windows. There's no recurring billing attached to running IRMAA scenarios. The incentive structure of the industry just doesn't point toward the comprehensive planning conversation. Not a conspiracy, an incentive structure, which explains almost everything in financial services if you pay enough attention. The COVID crash of 2020 opened one of the best Roth conversion windows in a decade. The S&P 500 dropped roughly 34% between February and March of 2020. Retirees whose advisors were doing comprehensive planning used that window to convert portions of their traditional IRA to Roth while the account values were temporarily reduced. You pay taxes on the conversion amount, and the conversion amount was 34% lower than it had been 2 months earlier. The market recovered by August of 2020. The recovery happened inside the Roth account, where it compounds tax-free permanently. The person who had a portfolio manager and not a comprehensive planner watched the same market recovery happen inside a traditional IRA. Same market, same percentage gain, different tax outcome for the next 30 years, based entirely on whether anyone in the relationship was looking for that window when it opened. 2022 was another one. The inflation-driven sell-off brought the market down roughly 19%, another conversion discount. 2025, the tariff-driven pullback, another window. Each one opened, sat there for a few months, and closed. If you knew to look, you used it. If nobody was looking, it passed. But wait, you might be thinking, I've always been disciplined. I've always done the smart thing. Why am I only hearing about these windows now? Because the smart thing in accumulation is to defer taxes and let compounding do its work. That was correct. But deferring taxes indefinitely has a cost structure that compounds it just compounds in the government's favor instead of yours. The smart thing in the decumulation phase is to manage how and when you pay those deferred taxes. That's a different calculation entirely, and it requires someone who's actively running it. There's a one-time story I want to leave you with before I pull this together. A man who retired from running a manufacturing business, sold it at 58, rolled a significant sum into an IRA, felt great about the number, $3.2 million. Met with a comprehensive planner about 4 years before his required minimum distributions were due to start. The planner showed him something he'd never modeled. Between 58 and 73, he had a 15-year window to move money from the traditional IRA to Roth, pay taxes at current rates, and permanently reduce his future required minimum distributions. He'd done some conversions, not enough. He'd left the majority sitting in the traditional account because paying taxes early felt wrong after a career of deferring them. He came to understand two things in that meeting. One, the window was almost closed. Two, the habit of deferring, which had served him for 30 years, had outlived its usefulness by about a decade. The tax bracket he'd be in at 75, when required minimum distributions forced $200,000 or more out of the account annually, would be considerably higher than the bracket he was in at 60. He deferred taxes from a lower bracket into a higher one. Perfectly rational, reasonable habit, wrong direction. It's like the guy who drove a manual transmission for 30 years and then got an electric vehicle. The muscle memory is deeply ingrained. First time in the EV, he reaches for the clutch that isn't there. No damage done. But the reflex that served him for 30 years is now irrelevant. Some of it is actively counterproductive. And don't pay taxes early is one of those reflexes that serves you in accumulation and actively costs you in decumulation if you apply it blindly. Now let me close with three things. Specific, calibrated to this exact topic, not generic advice that applies to everyone with a pulse. First, if you are 10 to 15 years from retirement and the majority of your savings is in pre-tax accounts, the most important financial meeting you can schedule in the next 90 days is not a portfolio review. It is a dedicated tax planning session with a CPA and a fee-only comprehensive financial planner who specialize in retirement income distribution. The goal of that meeting is to model three specific things. One, your projected required minimum distributions at your current trajectory. Two, your projected IRMAA bracket at several different income levels. Three, the surviving spouse scenario. What does retirement look like for the one who's left? That session will either reveal a window you can still act in or give you confirmation that your current plan already addresses these things. Either answer is worth more than the cost of the session. Second, look up the current IRMAA income thresholds yourself. They're published annually by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. They're public. They take about 3 minutes to find. Map your projected retirement income against those brackets specifically. Understand the precise dollar amount that separates you from the next surcharge tier. Because the asymmetry here is brutal. A $20,000 difference in annual retirement income might trigger a surcharge that costs you $6,000 per year in additional Medicare premiums. Every year, permanently. That is a solvable problem with advance notice. It is a fixed, recurring cost without it. Third, run the widow scenario. Sit down with a planner or with a spreadsheet. If you understand the tax tables and calculate what retirement looks like for the survivor when one of you dies. What tax bracket? What are the Medicare premiums? What percentage of Social Security becomes taxable? If that picture looks materially worse than your current joint situation, you have options available to you right now. Roth conversions while both of you are alive. Strategic IRA drawdowns before required minimum distributions begin. After-tax brokerage account contributions that diversify where your income comes from. Those options have expiration dates. The window doesn't stay open. Carol's window closed. Yours may still be open. None of these three things are investment changes. None of them require a new product. They require planning a fundamentally different activity than investing, performed by a different type of professional in service of a different output. The output isn't a bigger number on the account balance scoreboard. The output is a smaller number on the IRS's scoreboard. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. But the tax bill on that fortune doesn't run on autopilot. It runs on the decisions you made or didn't make in the years before the meter got large enough to matter. The scoreboard you've been watching your whole career shows what you accumulated. The second scoreboard shows what you keep. The IRS has been watching the second one the whole time. Make sure someone in your corner is watching it too.